The last human footprint on the moon was made in December of 1972. It's still there. No wind has touched it. No rain has erased it. In over 50 years, not a single person has gone back to look at it. For most of that time, the world assumed that was fine. We'd been there. We'd done it. The moon was just a rock, a cold, lifeless, airless rock with nothing to offer anyone. So why, after half a century of silence, are the two most powerful nations on Earth spending hundreds of billions of dollars racing back?
The United States has returned to the moon.
China's lunar probe has returned to Earth.
This isn't about science. It isn't about national pride. It's about something far more valuable and far more dangerous. Here is the story we were told about the original moon race. In the 1960s, two superpowers locked in a nuclear standoff needed a stage. They couldn't fight directly. The consequences were unthinkable. So they competed everywhere else, in proxy wars, in Olympic medals, and in space. The moon became the ultimate trophy. Whoever landed there first won. America got there first on July 20th, 1969. Neil Armstrong stepped onto the surface. 500 million people watched on grainy television screens. It was, without question, the greatest single achievement in human exploration. And then, it all collapsed. Apollo 17 landed in December 1972. The last astronauts drove their lunar rover, collected their samples, climbed back in, and left. The Saturn V was retired. The program ended. Congress cut the budget, and for over 50 years, no human being returned. The official explanation was straightforward. It was expensive, the political moment had passed, and the moon was just a barren wasteland. There was nothing there worth going back for. The whole exercise had been a Cold War stunt. The trophy had been claimed. Case closed. That explanation made sense at the time. It does not make sense anymore. Because in the 1990s and 2000s, something happened that completely changed the picture. A new generation of unmanned spacecraft began mapping the moon, not with the technology of the Apollo era, but with modern sensors capable of seeing what 1960s instruments simply missed. And what they found, sitting at the lunar South Pole, was extraordinary. Water. Billions of tons of it. Not liquid water. Frozen. Locked inside ancient, permanently shadowed craters. Impact basins so deep and so angled away from the sun that not a single photon of sunlight has touched their floors in over 3 billion years. The temperature inside those craters is around -170 degrees Celsius, cold enough to preserve water ice for geological ages. India's Chandrayaan-1 probe detected the spectral signature of water in 2009. NASA's L-Cross mission confirmed it the same year by deliberately crashing a rocket into the shadowed crater floor and firing a spectroscope at the ejecta cloud. The plume contained water, unambiguously, in quantities that rewrote everything we thought we knew about the moon. Let's be precise about what water ice on the moon actually means in practical terms. Because this is where it stops being interesting and starts being important. Split water into its constituent parts, hydrogen and oxygen, and you have the two most powerful chemical rocket propellants ever used in spaceflight. Liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen is what the space shuttle's main engines burned. It is what the Saturn V burned. It is the gold standard of chemical propulsion, the most energy-dense combination available to us. And the lunar South Pole may contain enough frozen water to produce rocket fuel for centuries of solar system exploration. Think about what that means. Every mission to Mars burns an enormous amount of fuel getting off Earth. But what if you didn't have to carry all that fuel from Earth's gravity well? What if you could stop at the moon, fill your tanks from local ice, and continue? The economics of interplanetary travel change completely. The moon isn't the destination. The moon is the filling station for every destination beyond it. Both the United States and China understand this perfectly. Their programs are not driven by nostalgia. They are driven by a calculation, cold, strategic, and entirely rational, about who controls the most valuable fuel depot in the inner solar system. Start with NASA. After years of false starts and canceled programs, Artemis emerged as a clearly defined, funded, bipartisan goal. Return humans to the moon. Establish a permanent presence at the lunar South Pole. Do it before anyone else. The architecture is massive, the most powerful rocket ever flown, a new crewed capsule, a new lunar lander, and eventually a gateway station in lunar orbit as a staging point. The cost runs into the hundreds of billions over the program's lifetime. But the strategic logic is airtight, and NASA's ambitions extend well beyond the hardware. The Artemis Accords, an international framework, have been signed by over 30 nations. The terms of those accords embed Western legal principles into the future of lunar commerce. They are, on the surface, a scientific cooperation agreement. But look more carefully, and what you see is geopolitical architecture, a framework designed to establish the rules of the moon, before the moon has any resources worth fighting over. Whoever writes the rules early controls the game later. China and Russia have not signed the Artemis Accords. They have chosen a different path. If you're finding this as fascinating as I do, subscribe right now. Every week we cover the strategic forces shaping civilization that the mainstream barely touches. China's National Space Administration has spent 15 years executing one of the most methodical and impressive deep space programs in human history. Chang'e 4 achieved the first ever soft landing on the lunar far side, a feat requiring a dedicated relay satellite to maintain communications because Earth is not visible from that hemisphere. Chang'e 5 returned fresh lunar samples in 2020, each mission more capable than the last. Their published roadmap concludes with crewed lunar landings in the early 2030s. Their stated target, the lunar South Pole. The same terrain, the same ice, the same prize. Both space powers have drawn their maps. Both maps point to the same place. Now here is where it gets truly extraordinary. Because water ice is not the only resource hiding at the South Pole. Embedded in the lunar surface, the fine powdery dust called regolith, there is a rare isotope of helium that has been accumulating for 4 billion years. It is called helium-3. On Earth, it is essentially non-existent. Our atmosphere and magnetic field deflect the solar wind that carries it. But the moon has no magnetic field and no atmosphere. 4 billion years of uninterrupted solar wind bombardment has deposited an estimated 1 million tons of helium-3 across the lunar surface. And here is why that matters enormously. Helium-3 is the theoretical perfect fuel for a specific kind of nuclear fusion, a reaction that produces no long-lived radioactive waste, no weapons-grade byproducts, and an energy yield that dwarfs anything in our current energy toolkit. China has stated this publicly and explicitly. One of the declared long-term objectives of their lunar program is helium-3 extraction for future energy use. A single payload, roughly 25 tons of helium-3 used in a working fusion reactor, could theoretically supply the entire United States' electricity consumption for a year. One rocket payload, 1 year of American energy. The nation that controls the moon's helium-3 supply in a fusion-powered future does not just have an economic advantage, it holds an energy monopoly over every other nation on the planet. That is not hyperbole. That is the arithmetic. So we have water ice, rocket fuel for an interplanetary civilization. We have helium-3, a potential foundation for a post-fossil fuel energy economy. We have two superpowers converging on the same strip of permanently shadowed terrain at the bottom of the moon. And we have a fourth dimension to this race that almost no one is discussing clearly. There are no rules. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 says, plainly, that no nation may claim the moon or any other celestial body as sovereign territory. Nobody owns the moon, fine. But the treaty says almost nothing about using what the moon contains. Resources extracted from the lunar surface fall into a legal gray zone that no international body has yet resolved. The silence is not accidental. In 1967, nobody imagined the moon would ever have extractable resources worth fighting over. The legal vacuum is a legacy of that limited imagination. Into that vacuum, both powers are moving aggressively. The United States passed the Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act in 2015, granting American companies the legal right to own resources they extract from space bodies. China has made no equivalent commitment to international resource-sharing frameworks. Both approaches are attempts to fill the same legal void with incompatible principles. Whoever is operating on the ground, physically extracting, physically using, when the legal framework is eventually forced into existence, writes those rules from an unassailable position. That is how frontiers have always worked. Presence becomes possession. Operations become rights. Rights become law. And there is one more dimension, one that space agencies discuss in private far more readily than in public: the military dimension. The moon occupies a unique geometric position in the Earth-Moon system. From cislunar space, the vast volume between Earth and the moon, you have a vantage point from which virtually every satellite in Earth orbit is observable. Civilian communications satellites, GPS and navigation constellations, reconnaissance platforms, nuclear early warning systems, a permanent outpost at or near the moon, equipped with advanced sensors and communication relays, is not merely a scientific base. It is potentially the most powerful surveillance and strategic platform in the history of warfare. Senior former NASA officials have acknowledged this publicly. The United States Space Force has documented strategies for cislunar awareness and control. China's People's Liberation Army has formally integrated space as a warfighting domain in its doctrine. The moon is, in military terms, the high ground, in a sense that makes every previous use of that phrase look modest. This is the full picture of the Moon Race 2.0, not astronaut heroes, not Tang and freeze-dried food, and school children watching a grainy broadcast on a black and white television. This is a race for resources worth trillions of dollars, for the energy fuel of the next century, for the right to write the legal framework governing an ungoverned frontier, and for the highest military vantage point in human history. For the first time since the Apollo era, the economics also support private involvement. Commercial lunar landers are already flying. Private companies hold NASA contracts to deliver payloads to the surface. The moon is becoming commercially viable, not in decades, but now. And that means the race is not just between two governments. It is between two visions of what the moon should be. The race is on. The finish line is the South Pole, and the stakes, for the first time since 1969, have never been higher in the entire history of human exploration. If this changed the way you see the moon tonight, hit subscribe. Every week we cover the stories beneath the stories, the real forces shaping where civilization is headed. We'll see you in the next one.